40.
So welcome everybody. Welcome to our November 2020 MAARC meeting, our COVID-induced Zoom meeting. Can y'all, I'm assuming y'all can hear me well enough so that I'm, okay, I get a couple of thumbs up there. It's great to see you all here. Some we haven't seen for a while. Jim Wilson, good to have you on board. Carlos Lazzarini, haven't seen you for a while. Couple other guys that we haven't seen. John O'Kolowitz, good to see you here again. And if I haven't said, oh, Skip, we haven't seen you in a long time. Good to have you back with us. It's the great family we have here of radio collectors involved with MAARC. The cool thing about radio collectors, they're almost all nice people. I say almost all because there's always a few exceptions, but you run into radio people almost anywhere and you can have a nice chat with them. Let me do a quick check here. Who is here from the farthest distance away? Is anybody farther away than Brazil, where Carlos came from, or is coming from even as we speak? We got Richmond, Virginia. That's not as far. Psychically, it may be a long ways away, but geographically, it's no farther than. So Carlos, you get the DX award today. Congratulations. Let's give Carlos a big hand. I'm glad you're joining. For those of you who don't know, Carlos originally set up the website that we use at MAARC, and that was a lot of work, and we still appreciate it. And we hope he's going to come back and visit us. He was up here in the States for a while. We hope he comes back to visit again after the COVID stuff ends. How many of you had a chance, last night attended the National Capital Radio and TV Museum Gala event? I did. It was cool. It's kind of nice. I wish we could have been together in person as they usually do. How did it go from your side, Brian?
I think it went pretty well. It was the first time we'd ever tried doing it virtually. And we didn't have as many people as we would have if we had done it in person, of course. But still, I think it went off pretty well. And hopefully one of these days we can get back to doing it in person.
Yeah, was some of that pre-recorded?
Most of it was pre-recorded. That way, if somebody screws up and sneezes, you can reshoot it. So it was mostly pre-recorded. And by the way, we still have some of the auction items for sale. So if you go to the museum website ncrtv.org, you can click on there and get to the auction. And I think there's still some radios for sale there.
Yeah, they had some nice radios for sale from the museum that are all checked out, fixed up, and good to go. So check those out. By the way, we are looking. I'm sorry, Ken, you want to say something?
Just to follow up what Brian said, I understand that the program is available to be viewed at the ncrtv.org website.
Oh yeah, good. Thank you for saying that. And speaking of online auctions, we are looking into the possibility in different programs that will allow MAARC to sponsor online auctions of radios, test equipment, and other assorted stuff. There's a couple. We might use something like the one that the museum is using. Let me ask a question. How many of you would be willing to sell items online through a MAARC auction? Wave your hand if you'd be willing to, if you'd be interested in selling something online. Okay. Next question. How many of you would be willing to buy something online? Well, good. So it might be, I think it looks like it'll be worth the effort. If anybody's interested in helping with that, please let me know. You can send me a chat right today or send me an email later, because it'll be a big Megillah to do, but it should be kind of fun. And there'll be a lot of stuff. How many have stuff you've been storing up waiting to sell at a MAARC auction, live auction? Yeah, almost everybody. I think may have a deluge when we have our first in-person auction, so we may have to limit it somehow, but there ought to be a lot of good stuff showing up when we finally get there. A couple of housekeeping notes about Zoom before we get started with the program. In the lower left corner of your screen, there's two icons. One's a microphone, one's a camera. Click on those to toggle on and off, to go on and off your microphone and on and off your video. In your upper right-hand corner, there's a view button, and if you click on that, you'll have choices of speaker view and gallery view, at least those. Gallery view puts everybody up on your screen, up to, I think, 49, and then you have to scroll over to get the rest. And speaker view will put the speaker, which would be me at this moment, real big so that you can see everything. And if when Tom starts and the show and tell starts the presentations, if you're not seeing the big picture, then switch to speaker view and you'll be able to see everything better. So,
Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
Jim Frazier. I just want to add one other thing about Zoom. You can use your space bar to temporarily unmute. I don't know if that's been, anybody's brought that up, but it's a nice little thing, sort of like keying your mic.
Yeah. It's a great
Okay.
point. Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Sure.
It's a little quicker than typing in Alt-A or clicking on the icon.
You gotta hold the space bar down to make a transmission now.
Yes, you have to hold it down. Thank you. As you just did, John. So let's go ahead with show and tell. Jeffrey Shearer, you've got a couple items that you'd like to share with us.
I do, but please don't ever call me Jeffrey.
I'm sorry, I didn't. It just slipped out. It just slipped out. I know you don't.
All right, so let's do this. You're going to share the screen with me, Domi?
Yes, sir. Which one do you want to show first?
Well, I'm going to do this one first.
Okay, you've got the capability to share your screen yourself if you want.
Okay, I thought I did that. Share screen. Share. Okay, yeah, here we go.
We got it.
Default. Okay, can you all see me?
Yes.
Okay, what I want to do here is, okay, where's my,
Yeah, there you go.
slideshow from the beginning. Okay, I'm going to call this the dual, and I'm going to do that. The dueling phonographs, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and then there's the middle. So the first one I have for you is this was a donation, okay, to the Historical Society, Northern Virginia Historical Society, radio and TV. And it was donated, and it had some issues. Okay, you can see that the platter is kind of messy, and also that it over on the right hand side there, you can see it doesn't have the original cartridge. Somebody screwed that one on there. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Here's the other one that I picked up at Kutztown a couple of years ago, and I started, I got bored, so I started working on the one, and what I got was, this is the new one, of course, and it's got the original cartridge, but we'll talk about it some more. So there's the one that was playing, okay? It was playing okay, and on all the speeds, everything was good with that. And of course, the cartridge there, it was playing this sound, okay? So the cartridge was good. But as you can see, it's kind of a mess. Now, the next one is the other one that I picked up at Kutztown, and I cleaned this up. This thing was a mess, but as you can see, that's what it looked like, okay? But again, this one didn't have any rumble either, but it wasn't playing at all. So I had to work on that one. This is the cartridge that was bad, okay, in the set, that I had picked up at Kutztown. And, I can't say enough, okay, that don't throw things away or get rid of things, because you never know when you're going to need them. And I have a box that I put away that has all of the phonograph equipment and 45 adapters, and I've even got some Edison reproducers in there and things like that. So a whole box full of stuff, okay? And so I went to that full box of stuff, and lo and behold, gosh, I found a cartridge, and it actually worked. So as you can see, I marked the 33 on there because I couldn't figure out the 78 and 33 thing. So, you know, it was one of those days when you're just, you know, you're putting things together and they don't work. So the junk box was full of goodies. And I had to test it on both the 78 and the 33 RPM. I got it playing and it was working. And then I marked them to get them right. And the unit plays great, except this is not the end. Neither set will play a stack of records and they'll return to the off position after playing the last or respond to the reject control. I need help. So I was en route to North Carolina last month, and I had to stop in Richmond, okay, to visit with my brother and drop some things off for him. And he suggested lunch with the couple down there. In other words, with George, Marshall, and Mike Gould, and Tom and I. And as we were discussing this, I mentioned that I was taking my turntable down to North Carolina to work on it with my brother-in-law, who's, you know, pretty handy with the stuff like that. So George says, well, Jeff, he says, I repair those things. So we went over to his house after lunch and we started working on it. Okay. And what happened was we took the thing completely apart. All right. Now you have to understand with these turntables, and I don't know if Randy ever mentioned this in his turntable repair, but boy, I'll tell you, it's important to remember where everything goes. Mark it, keep it, put it aside. But everything had to be, you know, degreased and everything, getting all the junk and everything out of there. And then we oiled and we added the lithium grease, you know, to the other one. And we were playing with the one with the General Electric cartridge. And what George says to me, I was going to change the cartridge and try to put something original back in there. And he said, well, that's a good cartridge, so hang on to it. But the whole trick on this is, and I'm going to slide this over, okay? This little booger right here, okay, is the key to the whole thing, right? Why it wasn't, you know, doing the flip, you know, it wasn't changing the records, it wasn't returning to the off position, it wasn't doing, it was this. And this thing here was sticking. And as you can see, it's riveted right here, okay? And we tried oil and everything, and, you know, using a screwdriver, we pushed against it going this way, and it has to be free flowing. Here's the spring for it. And it was very tight to the point that, you know, we finally got it to free up, but it still was sticking. So we took it down to, I took it down to North Carolina because I was pressed for time. We couldn't, you know, finish the job. And what I found was, and Tom was there too. He was watching George and I, and he says, you know, PB Blaster works pretty good. Well, I've been using PB Blaster for probably 30, 40 years. And it does work very well on things when they're pretty well frozen up, you know, and rusted, and it'll eat through that. So I took this down to, you know, to North Carolina, put the PB Blaster on there, and this thing freed up. Okay. And I was able to move it back and forth. And finally, you know, it was working properly, right? So it's called, you know, it comes down to this point. You need the right tool for the right job, okay? Over on the left is the PB Blaster that I used, okay? I haven't used the one over there on the lubricant, okay? I'll try that some other time, but on the way back to Virginia from North Carolina, I mentioned to Tom that the PB Blaster worked, and he says, well, you know, there's a thing called Cano Aerocroil. And so I picked up a can of that in Richmond when I stopped through there. I haven't tried that yet, but it goes back to, you know, when I say having the right tool for the right job. So those, the one on the left, I know works great. Okay, so if you get into a problem where, you know, things aren't freeing up properly, and they also sell it in the can which just has the spray nozzle, but don't get that one, okay, because it's a mess everywhere. Use the one with the little wand there that, you know, you put into the nozzle and it sprays great. And then here's the finished product. All right. I say again, don't get rid of anything. And I show you the finished product because you'll notice the 45 adapter. All right. It works great. And I was just, you know, thrilled that I could stack 10 records and it would play them all. Now on the other turntable, when I stacked the 10 records, it was slipping because the rubber, okay, was very hard. Okay, and that was causing the slip. So I'm going to have to replace that on the other one, right? And then this is the turntable test unit that I use. Okay, I have this little AX212 that's got the phono jack on the back, and I plug that in, turn it, and it plays great. So that's that one. Okay. Now, okay, let me see. I gotta hit this. All right, now let's go to the other one. So this other one, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Slideshow and from the beginning. Okay, the Snow White knockoff, getting it right. So one of the things I kept seeing on eBay was somebody was selling the Snow White in the brown version. And I'll show you what that looks like. Okay. And there's the brown version of the Snow White. And every time I was seeing it, the dial was wrong. And I asked a couple of times if the seller would show me the bottom of the radio. And sure enough, there's 3 holes that hold, okay, that set in. There's 3 mounting screws. And there were 4 holes drilled out, and they had a loop antenna on the back. So that was, so I said, okay, well, let me help you out. Okay, here's the BM, okay, 2 BM chassis. Okay, so the BM chassis can be found in the 209, 217s, there's a bunch of them, but the 247 as well. So this chassis is the same one. Okay, so if he robbed it out of another one, it would be right. Okay, and as you can see, though I didn't show you the bottom, but there's 3 holes, for the mounting screws, and it's got the 4 tubes. It's got a ballast tube and includes a 66, 66, 25 Z5 and a 43 output tube. Okay, so that's okay. So let's talk about this chassis. Well, I got repairing these chassis, and one of the problem I was having was no matter where I was, on the volume control, I couldn't adjust it. Right, it was full bore. So what happened was, I was playing around with it, and Ed Lyon said, well, why don't you just pull out the 6D6, which is the RF tube. Okay, I should move this out of the way, right? Let's see if that'll move out of the way. No, I can't do it. The RF tube and jump the filament. I went, jump the filament. And he says, yeah, it's only 6.3 volts. And fortunately I was on a Variac, so I didn't turn it all the way up. I put it at about 110, knowing that, we had that other 6 volts that we weren't going to be using. So I did, and the set was still playing fine and the volume was the same. So Ed says, well, he says, somehow that 6C6, which is, the detector there is picking up the signal. I went, well, I'll be darned. So, and it was picking it up, better than the 6D6 was. So what I did was I put a tube shield around it, and that fixed it. Okay. And as you can see, this is the tube shield that I added. It was one of those goat shields, and actually I could have done it with the band around it like this one, and that probably would have been better, but I'll go back and do that. But anyway, I provided both of these. I took these to Kutztown, both of the chassis with the cabinets, with the Bakelite cabinets. And this person has now got the right chassis for the right radio. Okay. And then for next month, I'm going to talk about my eMAARC reconstructions here. This is what the eMAARC looks like. Some of you have seen it. Okay, and you can't read the schematic, and that's a good thing because I'll save that for next month. All right, thank you very much.
Super, thank you, Jeff. Let's hear it for Jeff.
Any questions?
Jeff, it's John Stoll. I don't have a question. I will talk about the aerocoil for just 2 seconds.
Yeah, before you do that though, I've got your coil winder.
Excellent, thank you. The name of the manufacturer is Kano, K-A-N-O. They make the oil also as a liquid. You can get it in an 8-ounce can. A very good friend of mine is a clock repairman, and that is what he uses. For the real delicate, equipment, he's using a toothpick to apply it. And he works on, very ancient clocks, and he swears by it.
Hey, Jeff, I would add one more thing about that Croil oil, the kind in the can that John was just talking about. You got to watch what you store it in because it is so penetrating. The molecules are so small, it'll leak through the seams.
It's really good for getting rusted bolts loose.
Super. Any more comments or questions for Jeff? Okay, Robert Lozier, take over this, share the screen, and you got 5 minutes.
Okay, let me start here. I think you should see a full screen, play it again, Sam type of screen. And I pre-recorded my comments, so here we go. And I'll play the first part, which runs 4 minutes and something seconds.
Super.
This 1927 article is talking about the electrical interference spoiling the AM broadcasting that was taking the country by storm, especially those fascinated by DX listening. Every big city had radio clubs, and some were forming specialist groups to search out this interference. The magazines of the day had articles on how to identify and describe remediation from all the new electrical appliances like oil burning furnaces, electric refrigerators, radiant electric heaters, etc. And also how to locate and notify electric utilities about arcing from defective transformers and insulators, noise from elevators, street lights, trolleys, etc. About 15 years ago, I found this Davis Emergency Equipment Company trouble finder at one of the radio meets. It was in great shape except for the luggage handle had rotted. Fortunately, you could still get an exact replica handle back then. It was maybe 5 years before I came across the magazine article shown in the previous slides. I've seen only one other of these trouble finders since. The circuit consists of a loop antenna built into the walls of the cabinet that is parallel tuned by the big national vernier dial. Under the chassis are two All-American Mohawk fixed RF transformers. On the top side is a grid leak detector and one stage of transformer-coupled audio amplification to drive headphones. The transformer is also branded as an All-American product. So you have four UX199 triode tubes powered by two 22.5 volt B batteries in series and an unusual application of four 4.5 volt C batteries connected in parallel to serve as the filament A supply. Of course, for this outfit, long battery life was not that important. Making it light enough for easy handling was much more important. This trouble finder was used for close-in work. The club owned a Radiola 26 for determining what neighborhood to investigate. But it weighed 3 times as much, and the cabinet is almost 3 times larger. The loop swinging out from the cabinet would have made it very inconvenient to try to operate while carrying. I don't remember who was kind enough to send me this great picture. You cannot see it here, but close examination at the red arrow definitely shows it to be a Davis trouble finder. But there is one difference, and that is that the tuning dial is an ordinary 3.5-inch skirted variety with 0 to 100 markings and has no vernier adjustment. The National Velvet tuning dial on my set was mostly overkill on tuning a not very high Q loop built around the radio, but no doubt gave the illusion of precision apparatus. Okay, I'll surrender my my share, and the other 2 minutes and 30 seconds will come some other time, I guess. Any questions?
Thanks, Bob. Any questions? People seem to like it. Really cool piece of equipment, Bob. Thanks for bringing that.
Very nice piece of equipment.
Never even heard of something like like that. Now maybe Domi needs one of those to find the source of trouble in his house, but that may be a different kind of thing.
Ghostbusters.
Ghost. I like it. So, well, that's our show and tell for this month. Next, we'll go to our main presentation. Tom Shear, a longtime member of the club, longtime collector and fixer and buyer and seller of radios and equipment. So, Tom, take it away.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? Can everybody see? I want to thank Bob there for segueing, giving me a segue, because he was talking about American Mohawk transformers and that Davis RFI detector set. I thought that was pretty cool. So thank you, Bob. As we start this presentation on Lyric Radio and Wurlitzer, if you're all on gallery view, you can click on that one square at the top, and you just see this person talking, and you'll be able to see the printing on these slides as well. And as we go into talking about Wurlitzer, I'd like to start by saying that Wurlitzer was really an international organization. I mean, they started in Germany, as you'll see in a minute, but they were in Canada, they were all over the United States, they had stores everywhere, and they truly became very big. And another thing is, not only Lyric and Wurlitzer, but Eagle Radio that made the Nutridyne and K-Part are also involved in the Wurlitzer story, and so you'll hear a little bit about them. For those of you that want to hear a little technical stuff, there'll be one little piece on the Nutridyne and why Wurlitzer wanted to get it from Eagle and that sort of thing. Anyhow, here we start. Wurlitzer began in Germany making stringed instruments, especially violins, somewhere in the mid-1700s to the best of what I could find out. And they came to America and they organized the Franz Rudolf Wurlitzer Manufacturing Company was organized in Cincinnati in 1853. And Wurlitzer initially imported instruments like clarinets and flutes and brass instruments as well, and stringed instruments from Germany, and sold them in its U.S. stores. And by 1856, just 3 years after they came to the United States, they had a flagship store in New York City near Broadway and 6th Avenue, selling musical instruments, sheet music, Victrolas, and so forth, when Victrolas eventually came out. But they had stores all over, you know, not just Cincinnati and not just New York, but everywhere else. But violins seem to have started it all. Now, the first corporate move was in 1880, when the company began manufacturing pianos and eventually relocated to Tonawanda, New York, or actually North Tonawanda, New York, and built a big plant there. And later on in their history, DeKalb, Illinois became a major manufacturing location for a number of different types of Wurlitzer pianos, and there were many different kinds. And following this move to North Tonawanda, New York, which, by the way, is located near Niagara Falls and Buffalo, that geographical area, Wurlitzer quickly expanded, and they made band organs, orchestrions, player pianos, pipe organs, and these were all very popular in theaters during the silent movie era. Some of them, Wurlitzer got some of his ideas for things he invented by going to county fairs and state fairs and things like that, and figuring out what kind of instrument would make music that would entertain a lot of people and be loud enough to be heard. Wurlitzer began making innovative automatic harps about 1909 that were a little bit supposedly more durable than the European prototypes of that period. And from 1905 to 1911, J.W. Whitlock and Company of Rising Sun, Indiana, produced the automatic harps that Wurlitzer sold. Wurlitzer put their name on them, though. And in 1911, I did just a weird piece of information I saw when I was researching this. Wurlitzer was declared the top supplier of automatic harps to brothels in the Barbary Coast, which is San Francisco's red light district. And also about this time, 1910, the major facilities were still in North Tonawanda and Cincinnati, Ohio. The theater organ was introduced in 1910 and became Wurlitzer's most famous product. And many still exist all over the world. And there's a magnificent one in Richmond, Virginia at the Byrd Theater. I don't know if you, John, or anyone else have been to hear it, but a lot of people say it's pretty cool. Some are in private ownership. There's many of them all over the United States still in existence and in Europe. Some are in museums, some are in music conservatories. And there's a private owner in Europe that has one with 34 ranks, which is just a humongous pipe organ. So Wurlitzer also manufactured the band organ, the orchestrion, and the Nickelodeon. A precursor to the music palaces of the 1920s, the Nickelodeon Theater, and this is a picture of one in Toronto, Canada, about 1910. And they used a lot of posters on the outside and ornamentation to attract people, but when they got inside, usually what they found were hard seats and bare walls. 1920, this is kind of the beginning of the lyric era. All American Electrical Manufacturers was founded by a guy by the name of Ian Rowland in Chicago, Illinois, and with a primary focus on producing components for radio sets. Some of the research I found suggested that he made radio sets, but I'm not sure that's entirely true. Mohawk Electric Corporation was also founded that same year down the street in Chicago, Illinois. In 1922 began their focus on radio technology, with Rowland's All-American Electrical Manufacturer changing its name to All-American Radio Corporation, still in Chicago. Another company in Newark, New Jersey was formed called Eagle. They sold console and table battery sets from about 1923 to 1926. And they were basically across the Hudson from Wurlitzer's flagship store in Manhattan. And interestingly, the Nutridyne circuit was used in a lot of these Eagle radios. And in fact, Eagle actually had a model that we'll talk about in a second called the Nutridyne. But there were about 20 other independent radio manufacturers, part of the Independent Radio Manufacturers Association, that all capitalized on the Nutridyne circuit because they didn't have the patents for the superhets that RCA was holding on to with a tight fist. So they realized they could mitigate a lot of parasitic oscillation in their radio circuits with the Nutridyne circuit at a very cheap cost. In 1923, the Mohawk Corporation had Model 100 introduced, and I saw other research where it was actually available up to about 1925 in Canada, and we'll talk about that in a minute or two. It was a wood 3-knob 5-tube battery set. It was wood. It had a slant front, very beautiful radio. Now the Eagle Corporation at the same time had their Model A. They were just getting out of the blocks, and it was a 5-tube 3-knob battery table set, very much like the Mohawk 100. By 1924, there's some more corporate name changes. Mohawk Electric Corporation changed their name to Mohawk Corporation of Illinois, and they were still in Chicago. And at this same time, Mohawk also started doing business in Toronto, Canada as Mohawk Radio Limited, which was the Canadian subsidiary of Mohawk Corporation of Illinois. And the cabinets in Canada were made by Thomas in Woodstock, Ontario. And here's a little picture to the left of the decal that would be found on the inside of the cabinets that were made by Thomas. And I actually have one. Eagle introduced the Model B Nutridyne the same year in 1924. And it was a wood 3-knob 5-tube battery TRF set. And virtually all the Eagle radios were TRF sets, and until mid-1930, all the Mohawk ones were as well. So in 1925, there was advertising emerging depicting Rowland's manufacturing company using All-American as a trade name. That was just a tidbit I threw in there. Eagle continued the Nutridyne table radio as the Model F in 1925, and they had several other console and table models with 5 tubes and 3 knobs. And that year was Eagle's heyday. Mohawk, on the other hand, had some nicer portable table and console battery sets with 5 or 6 tubes, arguably a little nicer than what Eagle was offering. So Mohawk made radios for other companies too. And like I said earlier, in 1923, they came out with a 100, but it was also made for and sold specifically by Otto Higgle Company in Toronto. So there's evidence out there that Mohawk made radios for other companies as well, not just for Wurlitzer. So this company was established in Toronto during 1896 and making piano and organ supplies. So as you can probably guess, the owner was from Germany and very likely familiar with the Wurlitzer family. So many trade names in 1926, and we can debate some of them if anybody wants to. Some sources suggest Rowland All-American was making radio sets under All-Max, Chieftain, Lyric, Sextet. Now, I have heard of the Sextets and, of course, Lyrics. All-Max and Chieftains, I have not seen one. I don't know if anybody else out there has. All-American was a component supplier and principally for Mohawk. Another component that Rowland was making were vacuum tubes with the Lyric brand name on them for radios, at least in the late 1920s. And this year, Eagle kind of fell into a decline, but they had several console and table battery sets available. Still, each had 5 tubes and 3 dials. And of course, these were TRF sets. Mohawk had at least 8 nicer and console battery sets using 3 knobs and 6 tubes. And they all had Native American model names like Cherokee, Iroquois, Navajo, Pocahontas, and others. And I think most of us that have been collecting a while have seen 1 or 2 of these along the road. Yeah, Dave. Does Dave Rossetti have a question? I don't know, for some reason you lit up on my screen. Okay, I'll minimize that and move on. So 1927 was a merger and acquisition year. Of course, All-American Radio Corporation and Mohawk Corporation were pioneers in the Chicago area for early radio, and they merged that very near the end of the year. Some sources say it was 1928, but I'm going to stick with late 1927, and they formed All-American Mohawk Corporation. And of course, All-American brought the Lyric name to the partnership, and Mohawk supplied the engineering talent and distribution network, which included primarily Wurlitzer and possibly some others. All-American Mohawk marketed radio sets primarily under the Lyric and Mohawk names. The Mohawk Model 44 was a wood table battery set with 2 knobs and 6 tubes and a very attractive radio, and it was a TRF set. The most important thing in this year in 1927 was when Wurlitzer purchased the Eagle Radio Company. Moving into 1928, Wurlitzer was now featuring the All-American Mohawk Corporation Lyric radio and its Christmas advertising for its New York City store. And Wurlitzer had become one of Mohawk's largest dealers. And advertised prices of these radios, as you can see on your screen right now, range from $92.50 to $425 without tubes. So that'd be over $6,000 today. And I'm sure back then the tubes were probably another few $100s added to that price, which would probably bring the price of that high dollar set to around $9,000 or $10,000 today, today's money. And All-American Mohawk lyric sets from 1928 continued into 1929. All of them were they were AC, no more batteries. They were AC TRF sets. They had the 6-tube models, 60, 61, 25, and 6, and the 8-tube models, which are listed on your screen. The 8-tube models had an extra RF stage. Again, these were TRFs, and they had push-pull output, so you had 2 output tubes instead of 1. One thing I learned that Mohawk did over the years, they kept adding an RF stage to make their TRF radios a little nicer. Here's a picture of that ad from 1928, and an interesting thing in this ad that it's not very clear in this particular picture, but if you look at this little guy down here, this was their $92 radio. It was a 6-tuber, 5 or 6 tubes, but it mentioned it was an oscillation free radio, which I guess kind of meant that they'd already put the Nucleodyne circuit into it, and it didn't have the parasitic oscillations that some of the other radio companies had in their radios. So in 1929 comes the big acquisition. The research suggests Rudolf Wurlitzer took over production of lyric radios. And I believe that to be true for both the U.S. production in North Tonawanda and that subsidiary in Toronto. And in a picture in a little bit, you'll see why I believe that. Ian Rowland left All-American Mohawk in 1929 and set up Rowland Corporation, and there's more to that you'll learn later too. So he's no longer with that bunch. All-American Mohawk lyric sets from 1929 continued into 1930, and these were their last TRF radio, and they were all AC sets. They had 10 tubes, 4 RF stages, push-pull output, and they came in 2 versions. One was 25 hertz and one was 60 hertz. This was an in-between year, 1930. These were some models I put in there that I saw in an old Bunis book on collectible radios. I haven't been able to find schematics on these, so I can't tell you much about them, except for the fact that you can see that the top 2 have 7 tubes and 3 knobs, and there was a cathedral with 6 tubes and 3 knobs. I'm thinking that possibly these were very early superhets, but I couldn't find a schematic to prove it. But they were AC radios. In 1931, 1932, Lyric, the Canadian part of Lyric, which was known as Mohawk Radio Limited, made the Lyric name on the front of the cabinet, and a Wurlitzer metal tag was added to the rear of the cabinet. One thing about these superhets, they all started with Lyric Mohawk in 1931, and they all had an intermediate frequency of 175 kilohertz, which is a little different than what we're used to seeing in a lot of other radios we work on. It's a lot lower than the 455 we're used to. All of these were AC sets. The S6 was a 6-tube 3-knob radio. You could get it in a lowboy console or a wood cathedral. And I acquired one in Lexington, Virginia, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years ago, and restored it. And that'll be on the next slide. The S7 was a 7-tube 3-knob cathedral radio, available as a console also. And I have not been able to find a schematic anywhere for that in Riders or anywhere, and S8 as well. S8 was an 8-tube 3-knob set, and all 3 of these were made in Canada, and they were sold by Wurlitzer. And here's a tag off the back of the S6. There's a picture of it, and it shows Mohawk Radio Limited, Toronto, Canada, and it's the S6, the nomenclature used by Lyric back then. The S stipulated, I guess, that it was a superhet radio, and these were their first ones. So here's a picture of my 1931 S6, and there's what the tag looks like on the back of the radio, product of Wurlitzer, and it was a 6-tube early radio. It's actually behind me here where I'm sitting right now, and it plays, but it's not the greatest sounding radio in the world, but it was their first, their entry level radio in the superhet design. Also, this was the S7 radio that year. This is a picture I swiped off the internet. And this was a cathedral made by the same company, 7 tubes. And the advertising for it using the new screen grid was supposedly made it, I'm guessing what that screen grid meant was that it had a pentode in it for that 7th tube. Let's see, in 32, 33, US and Canada superhets still using that same weird IF frequency, the Lyric 39 and 49. And I know for sure these were manufactured in Canada and speculate they were probably made in Tonawanda also. And they were AC sets, they were superhets with 9 tubes, and the second one had one more speaker than the first one. So Wurlitzer produced and sold its own radios using the Lyric brand name starting in 1934, and these were actually made in North Tonawanda and using the Lyric name. There are probably some Lyric radios out there, or Mohawk made some radios that did not go through the Wurlitzer sales network, but for sure the Wurlitzer was making radios in Tonawanda and selling them with the Lyric name on them. The SA91A, I have one. It's a really nice AC set with 9 tubes and 4 knobs. I got it at a radioactivity tailgate back in the 90s. It's a small Art Deco wood lowboy console with 4 legs with a 175 kilohertz IF, and it indicates, the schematic indicates in writers that it's an all-American Mohawk radio. There were tombstone table, console, and side table Lyrics with 4 to 13 tubes during that year. And I'm going to start speeding up a little bit so we don't run too late. And that's what that radio looks like. Everybody say, ooh, ah, and I'll move on. The 9 tubes included 2 push-pull 47s for their output. And I couldn't find any Wurlitzer information anywhere on the chassis or cabinet. So in the 30s was Wurlitzer's jukebox heyday, and they were the iconic jukebox, and sometimes the Wurlitzer meant jukebox. And 2 reasons that Wurlitzer jukeboxes did so well. When Prohibition ended, there was a market increase for coin-operated music machines in bars and dance halls. And then there was this guy by the name of Capehart, who you've heard of, I'm sure, somewhere. Homer Capehart formed the Capehart Corporation. He was a businessman and politician in Indiana, and he had been selling. He started off in World War I as an infantry soldier, and then got into supply. And then as he got out of the army, he got into supply of radio parts and phonograph parts and things of that nature. And he was selling phonograph parts to Wurlitzer, and they hired him as vice president and general sales manager, and he was a salesman. And so he really helped Wurlitzer sell these jukeboxes. He had also earlier in his career bought the Packard Piano Company in the Midwest to manufacture musical instruments, and he founded Capehart Corporation, which used the Amperian brand that I know that a few of you are familiar with, in 1927. And they about went bankrupt almost when their record changing apparatus and some of their record players began breaking records, and they couldn't get it fixed fast enough. And so their sales demise led to bankruptcy pretty much, and they were acquired by Farnsworth, not all of them, but parts of it, in 1939. During World War II, Wurlitzer stopped making organs and other luxury items, including radios, to make proximity fuses for our military. And then after growing throughout the 30s, Mohawk in Toronto was acquired by Addison. I know some of you out there that have Catalan radios know who Addison is, and they produced beautiful pre-war Art Deco Catalan radios like the one on the next slide. And again, they were in Canada. So the Canadian subsidiary of Mohawk became part of Addison at that time, right before World War II. And that's the Addison 2 waterfall. There's a guy a couple neighborhoods away from me that's got, I guess several hundred Catalan radios, some in Ohio and some of them he has here. And he has this radio, and I think it's just drop dead beautiful in my opinion. So Wurlitzer manufactured monaural jukeboxes under the Lyric name in the 40s, 50s, and into the early 60s. And they used the Lyric name on them. In 1963, stereo came out, and Wurlitzer marketed their jukeboxes that used stereo as stereophonic. And so their jukebox production kind of waned in the late 60s because Seeberg had a better mechanism to play both sides of the record, and they far exceeded what Wurlitzer was making. They struggled on for a few years, and in 1971, that was their last model, the 1050. Didn't sell well. The whole jukebox line was sold to a German company in 73, because Wurlitzer still had connections back in Germany with a lot of companies in the music industry. Rowland Corporation in 1948 was bought by Zenith, and also in Chicago, and Zenith used it to make television picture tubes for many years. And then Wurlitzer produced electric pianos from 1955 to 1982, and these were commonly known as Whirlies. And Supertramp is a rock group that was that really used them the most of all the R&B and rock groups. Wurlitzer became famous for a variety of other pianos, especially the Spinet, which they made. It was oriented for beginner players, and then they had a beautiful butterfly grand piano with a lot of features that no other piano in the world had, and so they invented a lot of technical things with grand pianos, especially that butterfly grand. In the 60s, late 60s, electric guitars, Wurlitzer decided to get into them, and they had a Elkhart, Indiana location by this time, and became a distributor for guitars made by Holman Woodell of Kansas. And the early Wurlitzer guitars were wired for stereo output. So that was pretty a new thing. Nobody else was doing that yet. And Wurlitzer left, within a year or so, Wurlitzer left that company due to quality issues with the product, and Wurlitzer guitars were then made by Wilson in Italy for Wurlitzer. And then they had semi-hollow body electric and acoustic guitars, and they distributed those Italian guitars under the Wurlitzer name until 1969, when they stopped selling guitars under their own brand name. So 1988 to present, Baldwin Piano purchased Wurlitzer's piano making assets and brand. And then soon after, Gibson Guitar acquired Baldwin as a subsidiary. Gibson also purchased Deutsche Wurlitzer Jukebox and Electronics Vending brand in 2006 over in Germany. That's where the jukebox stuff went, briefly bringing everything back together under one owner, the whole product line. So Baldwin stopped using the Wurlitzer name on pianos by the end of 2009. Gibson now uses the Wurlitzer brand exclusively for jukeboxes and vending machines. Wurlitzer continued to manufacture jukeboxes and vending machines in Hullhorst, Germany until 2013. And Wurlitzer still makes replacement parts, and its headquarters are now located in Hullhorst, Germany, with distribution and sales offices in Gurney, Illinois, and Oxfordshire, England. So in conclusion, it looks like I have a couple minutes to spare. It appears that production of Mohawk's Lyric line of radios, both in the United States and Canada, was amalgamated under Wurlitzer before 1930 and ended at the onset of World War II. The Canadian plant, at the very least, was acquired by Edison a year or two before the US and Canada entered World War II. According to Duke University archives I dug out, the Lyric trade name lasted into the 1950s, but I believe that really should have been the 1960s because Wurlitzer was marketing monaural jukeboxes then as Lyrics. So that's all. Thanks for watching. I have my email here. If anybody would like me to send a copy of this slideshow to them, you can email me and I'll send you the little PowerPoint if you want it. That's my email. And the sources that I used are listed here. Should we open it up for questions, John, or what do you think?
Yes, let's do. And Tom, maybe you can stop sharing your screen so we can see the people who ask the questions. And so let's open it up for questions and comments to Tom. I see Tim Webster is in Niagara Falls, very close to North Tonawanda, so maybe he did that in honor of your presentation.
Oh, thank you, Tim.
Oh, my.
Yeah, I should have had that backdrop for, or something, a picture of that when they moved the plant from Cincinnati to North Tonawanda.
Right, right.
I used to have a cousin, well, I have a cousin that used to have a restaurant there too.
Well, I've got a Wurlitzer Sideman from about 1955, 56 that has always sat in my back room. I've never done anything with it. It's a percussion section in a box is what it is. It's an add-on to the organ.
Wow. I understand when they made their electric harps, they actually had little fingers that would pluck the strings that were mechanical.
Well, this box has a motor and a disc that turns, and there's a whole lot of copper fingers that go over contacts to make things like brush sounds and drum sounds in time, and you can vary the speed of the motor to change the tempo.
Oh, how cool is that?
In RCA had what they called the RCA Victor record demonstrator that also used the Wurlitzer, pieces and whatnot, the changers and whatnot. And it's a 12 record set.
And
the founder of go ahead.
I was
John.
going to say one of the things that you didn't mention was about Robert Hope Jones and Wurlitzer, because all the theater organs were done under Robert Hope Jones's, or at least the early ones, under his directorship and direction. Yet, and finally, he and Wurlitzer just had it out when his stuff became too complicated. And I have a Wurlitzer pipe, a 7-rank Wurlitzer pipe organ that came out of a theater in Connecticut here in my house, and it has Robert Hope Jones's label on it. It says Wurlitzer orchestra designed by Robert Hope Jones or something to that effect. You can see it on my website.
How many ranks is it?
7 ranks.
7 ranks.
Mm-hmm. I also play at the Bird. I'm a relief organist at the Bird Theater sometimes.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah,
that's the only one I know of in Virginia is the one at the Bird Theater.
Well, actually, it's I think it's 36 ranks in somebody's house up in Great Falls. A guy by the name of Hardman, Jack Hardman.
Oh, that's a private. That's the private owner that I referred to earlier. I just didn't know where he was.
Yeah, that organ is actually up for grabs right now. Anybody?
That's a monster.
Yeah, anybody that wants it, you can either buy it, or if you have a nonprofit, he'll probably give it to you.
You need a few acres to put it on.
Yeah, he's selling his house out, so it probably take $100,000 to get it out the house.
Really? Okay, John, I'll contact you on that. We've got a guy that actually his license plate is organ donor, but he collects organs and donates them, to people that need them.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it in Virginia if somebody, would take it in Virginia, but it's
well, John.
Yeah, he's in Virginia.
That one in Great Falls you're alluding to is I think the largest known pipe organ that Wurlitzer made, with 34 ranks, I think. I don't think there's several other large ones in Europe in conservatories and things of that nature.
Right.
I don't know if anybody remembers or not, but way back when there was a Takeoff comedy record, and I forget who the talent was, but one of the comments on it was, "Gee, Dad, it's a Wurlitzer."
So we got any other questions or comments or additions for Tom?
I know I'd love to see one of those little S7 cathedrals from 1931. I thought that was a beautiful cabinet.
I think pretty sure it's a Wurlitzer theater organ in my hometown in Michigan that was taken out of the theater and they put it into a store, a retail store that sells lots of gifts and stuff. And they've got it in a glass case so you can see the ranks of the organ, and then the console is sitting outside, and especially during the Christmas season, they'll have somebody in there playing it all the time. It's really cool. Has a nice sound.
Well, maybe we should have a field trip to the Bird Theater and let John play that organ for us.
Yeah. Get my feet warm.
If they ever open it again.
Hey, this is Brian. For those of you who may not know, there's a Wurlitzer theater organ at the Weinberg Theater in Frederick, Maryland. And about before the virus hit, about 4 times a year they would have a silent movie night where they would have a Buster Keaton movie and a guy come in and play the Wurlitzer organ along with the silent movies. So if the virus ever ends, hopefully we can get back and do that again. It's a great experience.
Baltimore has one too in the Engineers Club.
Great ideas. We could have a MAARC meeting in the theater and listen to the organ. Well, Tom, thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
You obviously did a lot of research and there's a lot of interesting information in there. Thanks so much.
Now it's time for the auction.
Yes, I've got this Farnsworth right behind me for sale. Let's put that up first. So the formal part of the meeting is going to end now, and so we'll open it up for people to chat and have discussions on the kinds of things we chat and discuss regularly. So to end the formal, I just want to say thanks to everybody for coming, and we'll be staying on Zoom for who knows how long. Things are pretty bad around here.
I'd recommend you get down to that Market Pro computer show at sales.
We'll stay on Zoom until we can get free to meet again, and we'll keep you posted. How many of you are getting the email once a month from MAARC with announcements and such like that? If you're not getting it, please contact Jeff Shear and correct your email address, because we send it out to all members who have addresses. Some of them kicked back and we don't know what to do about it unless you tell us. So to end the formal meeting, I'll just ask you all to stay safe and do what works to keep yourself and your loved ones and everybody else safe.
And if you're lifetime members, okay, any of you lifetime members, please give me your information if it's changed in the last 20 years. No, that would be email and phone number. Thank you.
If your email has changed in the last 35 years, please tell Jeff.
I have a request for Dave Rossetti, if he would put his email in the chat, and I will send him a copy of that. He asked for a copy of the of my presentation, and he was going to post it. I just need his email. I don't have it in my email directory.
Great, thank you. So Domi, you want to ask everybody to unmute? You have to unmute yourself if you want to speak. So the floor is open to keep everybody from talking over everybody else. Let's use the old hand thing. Over.
And I am going to stop recording so we can talk freely right now. So I am stopping recording now.